911, what's your emergency?
There's blood in the water! She's not coming out! Please, someone help her!
What began as a picture-perfect afternoon at Azure Cove Marine Park quickly spiraled into one of the most haunting tragedies ever witnessed in a captive orca show. Raina McAdams, a respected marine biologist and lead trainer, had always believed in the unbreakable bond between human and orca. But during a routine performance with Kael, the park's prized killer whale, that trust shattered in front of 500 horrified spectators. As emergency crews raced to the scene and headlines exploded across continents, more stories began to surface. A violent strike in Spain, a silent collapse in San Diego. One by one, the facade of control slipped, revealing the devastating cost of keeping wild giants in glass cages. If this story moved you or made you question what really happens behind the glass, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It helps us bring more untold stories like this to light. Raina McAdams had never imagined herself anywhere but near the ocean. At 27, she had built her life around the water, its rhythms guiding her from the stormy shores of Oregon to the glistening tanks of Azure Cove, a premier marine park on the California coast. From a young age, she had felt a pull stronger than mere fascination, a kind of reverence for the creatures that ruled the sea. That devotion had led her to marine biology, and eventually to her current role, lead orca trainer at Azure Cove. Her assignment was both a privilege and a weight, because Kael wasn't just any orca, he was the star. Towering at over 20 feet long and weighing more than 10,000 pounds, Kael was the main attraction. His powerful breaches, effortless spins, and haunting calls were the centerpiece of 6 weekly shows that drew thousands of visitors. Entire families came to witness his majestic performances. Tourists snapped photos. Children screamed with delight when Kael sent waves of water splashing into the crowd. For the public, he was a marvel. For the park, he was a multi-million-dollar asset. For Raina, he was something more an animal she had dedicated years to understanding, protecting, and bonding with. But lately, something in Kael had changed. Raina had started noticing behaviors that troubled her, though she rarely admitted it aloud. Kael had begun slapping his tail against the tank walls with growing intensity, sometimes ignoring cues altogether, staring blankly at his trainers, or turning away mid-routine. He seemed distracted, sometimes irritated. Still, Raina defended him. She believed in their connection, the hundreds of hours spent in training, the trust she thought they'd built. Her colleagues were more cautious. One, an older trainer who had worked with marine mammals for over 2 decades, had formally requested Kael be removed from shows. When management refused, citing his critical role in park revenue, the trainer resigned. Raina never forgot that moment. Watching the man pack up his locker, his expression torn between frustration and grief, had shaken something in her, but she'd stayed. She believed she could reach Kael, even when others turned away. That belief had become a kind of stubborn hope. Now, as she stood beside the shimmering pool under a soft afternoon sky, her wetsuit zipped up to her collarbone. Raina looked across the water toward Kael's massive form, gliding just below the surface. The amphitheater behind her was slowly filling with guests, children with popcorn, parents holding strollers, teens with cameras at the ready. Laughter echoed off the concrete walls. The show was scheduled to begin soon. Kael surfaced briefly, his dorsal fin slicing through the water. For a moment, their eyes met. Something in his gaze felt distant, unreadable, not hostile, not warm, just far away. Raina blinked, shook off the chill that crept along her spine, and told herself, again, that everything would be fine. It had to be. The performance unfolded with practiced grace, echoing the same rhythm Raina had known for years. Music swelled through the amphitheater, its notes rising above the gentle hum of anticipation. The crowd responded with energy, cheering, clapping, leaning forward in their seats as if drawn closer by sheer wonder. Kael emerged on cue, his sleek black and white form slicing through the water like a living wave. Each movement was fluid, measured, and familiar. Raina stood poised near the edge of the platform, her posture composed, eyes locked on her partner in the water. With a small, deliberate gesture, she signaled the first routine. Kael responded instantly, launching into a high arc that sent glistening spray over the front rows. The splash drew a delighted roar from the children, their faces lit with awe. Cameras clicked, laughter rippled through the stands. It was the kind of moment Azure Cove was built upon. They moved through the middle sequences with ease, spins, tail slaps, and synchronized surfacing, each act stitched together like a carefully rehearsed ballet. Raina's mind clicked through each step, but part of her was elsewhere, watching Kael more closely than usual. His movements, while polished, carried a weight she couldn't quite name. He followed cues, but something about his pacing felt different. Still, the audience wouldn't have noticed. To them, the magic was intact. As the final segment approached, Raina inhaled deeply and stepped down into the water. The shift from air to liquid sent a brief chill through her, the familiar cold that came with every swim. But this time, it lingered. She brushed it off as nerves. Kael circled her slowly, his dorsal fin rising beside her like a silent shadow. They were in sync, almost. This finale was always the most intimate part of the show. A slow, synchronized glide through the tank, leading into a powerful breach just beside her. It was a moment meant to highlight their connection, a tribute to trust. Raina raised her arm, gave the signal they had rehearsed countless times. Kael dove deeper, just as expected. Then, without pause, he veered off pattern. The motion was subtle at first, a shift in angle beneath the water, easily missed by anyone watching from the stands. Raina blinked, briefly confused. Before she could process it, Kael's mass surged upward, not in the elegant curve of a practiced leap, but in a direct, forceful path. The air shifted, screams rang out. Something had gone wrong, but it happened too quickly to comprehend. The surface rippled once, then stilled. The first scream broke through the amphitheater like a sudden gust of wind, sweeping across the rows in a rising tide of confusion. Then came more dozens of voices, some panicked, others stunned into silence. Parents instinctively reached for their children, pulling them close as eyes locked on the pool, trying to make sense of what was unfolding beneath the shimmering surface. On the trainer platform, emergency protocols snapped into motion. Colored buoys were tossed into the water, their bright shapes bobbing uselessly on the surface. Buckets of fish were flung across the tank, a hopeful distraction meant to redirect attention. 2 staff members grabbed long aluminum poles, extending them toward the water's edge with measured precision. But nothing seemed to matter. Kael remained locked in his own world, impervious to every attempt at intervention. In the stands, what had begun as a family outing now turned into a waking nightmare. Children clutched stuffed toys, their faces pale and frozen. Others buried their heads in their parents' shoulders, unable to look. The air grew thick with disbelief. A hush settled over the outer rows, the kind of silence that only fear can produce. From above, it was chaos, but under the surface, it was something else, entirely quiet, dark, and brutal. Raina's body emerged briefly, then disappeared again, limp and weightless in the vast enclosure. Her wetsuit, once sleek and professional, now appeared crumpled and disjointed. The tank, designed to showcase the harmony between human and animal, had become an arena of loss. When Kael finally released her, the water shifted slightly as her form floated upward. There was no resistance, no movement, just a fragile stillness. The team dove in with practiced efficiency, retrieving her body and laying it gently on the platform. Everything after that happened in near silence. Medical staff rushed to her side, voices low but urgent. The audience, still in their seats, could only watch. The illusion of control, once so carefully maintained, had shattered completely. Blood mingled with the water, fanning out in slow, deliberate clouds. There was no curtain to draw, no narrator to explain what had gone wrong. Just red water, the hum of equipment, and the mechanical rhythm of CPR compressions echoing into the empty space. An hour later, the announcement came. Raina McAdams had been pronounced dead on site. The official cause was massive internal trauma, crushed ribs, a punctured lung, and catastrophic blunt force injuries. There was no chance of recovery, no moment of clarity. It had ended before anyone could truly understand it had begun. What remained was a still pool, a stunned audience, and the chilling knowledge that something sacred had been broken. The stillness that followed was unlike anything Azure Cove had ever known. Within minutes of the incident, the park's usual soundtrack of music, laughter, and ocean ambiance gave way to muffled radio chatter and the urgent shuffle of footsteps. Guests were led out in small clusters, guided past the gift shops and food stands that only moments before had buzzed with life. The stadium, once full of cheers, now stood cordoned off in silence, its empty seats bearing witness to something that no one could quite comprehend. Outside the gates, the news had already begun to spread. Camera crews gathered at the entrance, reporters speaking into microphones with the gravity of tragedy in their voices. Helicopters circled above. Parents held their children closer as they passed through exit checkpoints, many too shaken to speak. In a formal statement delivered that evening, the park announced the immediate suspension of all Orca performances, indefinitely. It was framed as a gesture of respect, but it could not undo what had been witnessed. Inside the administration wing, meetings turned tense. Damage control teams scrambled to manage the narrative, while trainers and staff sat in stunned disbelief. There were questions, many of them, but few answers. Beneath the controlled language of press releases and legal counsel, an undeniable truth began to surface. This hadn't come without warning. Raina's family, devastated and grieving, filed a wrongful death lawsuit within a week. Their claim was clear and unwavering. This tragedy had been preventable. They alleged the park had ignored critical red flags, suppressing reports of Kael's increasingly erratic behavior to protect revenue and reputation. Internal documents emerged, showing prior incidents missed cues, unexplained aggression, periods of withdrawal. One log described Kael striking the tank wall with such force that staff had considered temporary removal. Another detailed his refusal to respond to routine commands over a 3-day stretch, yet nothing had been done. As the investigation deepened, former employees stepped forward. One had submitted a written recommendation to retire Kael months earlier, citing safety concerns and mental deterioration. The suggestion was declined. Management had insisted the show go on. After several months of private mediation, the case was settled out of court. The terms were sealed, but included a commitment from Azure Cove to fund independent research into the psychological well-being of captive orcas. A gesture, perhaps, of atonement. Still, no settlement, no matter how well crafted, could return what had been lost. Raina's absence lingered not just in the empty halls of the staff wing or in the silent corners of the stadium, but in the quiet ache of a family left behind, and the public's uneasy realization that the line between spectacle and sacrifice had been crossed. While the tragedy at Azure Cove captured headlines across the United States, a quieter tension was building an ocean away. On the wind-swept island of Crest Hollow, nestled off Spain's northern coast, the marine park Luma Vista stood as Europe's crown jewel of aquatic entertainment. Known for its sprawling habitats and spectacular orca performances, the park drew visitors from across the continent. At the heart of its acclaim was Varro, a 3,300-pound male orca whose size was rivaled only by his elegance. Emilia Dresner, a 29-year-old marine biologist from Germany, had spent the better part of a decade working with Varro. Their bond had grown over countless hours of training, observation, and silent understanding. Where others saw caution in Varro's eyes, Emilia saw intelligence. Where some noted distance, she interpreted calm. For her, their relationship was the result of years of mutual trust, a connection not easily explained, but deeply felt. Other trainers remained wary. Varro's body bore faint but telling marks, scratches from skirmishes with other orcas, subtle abrasions from long-ago incidents. He rarely vocalized during training and often kept to himself, drifting apart from his pod mates without prompting. Still, Emilia defended him fiercely, convinced that what others saw as detachment was simply misunderstood complexity. She believed their communication ran deeper than gestures or routines, rooted instead in a kind of intuitive knowing. That morning's session had been scheduled as a light refresher, nothing complicated, a simple proximity exercise meant to reinforce familiarity and ease. Emilia stood near the tank's edge, her wetsuit zipped and clipboard left behind. Varro approached from the far side, his form cutting through the water with unhurried grace. The plan was simple. He would rise just enough to brush his snout gently against her foot. It was a behavior they had completed dozens of times without incident. But something in Vero's movement that day felt unusually deliberate. His approach lacked its usual softness. When he surfaced, there was no hesitation, no pause to read her expression. The contact came quickly sharp, solid. Amelia was thrown backward, the air leaving her lungs before she could understand what had changed. The moment was silent, stripped of all ceremony. The water accepted her body without resistance, pulling her into its depth with quiet finality. Vero hovered nearby, his massive frame casting a shadow over her descent. In those moments, the distinctions between performance and instinct blurred completely. Amelia's senses dulled as the cold settled in, and the world above dimmed beyond reach. Luma Vista, for all its gleam and spectacle, had missed what lay beneath the surface, a truth shaped not by routines or trust, but by the raw, unspoken nature of captivity. Everything Amelia remembered afterward came in fragments, flashes of pressure, a scraping pain along her arm, the suffocating weight of water pressing against her chest. There had been no clarity, only sensation. Her body twisted, reflexes flailing in search of a surface she couldn't find. Time lost its rhythm beneath the weight of fear and confusion. It was not until the grip loosened that her senses began to register again, though none of it felt real. Varo rose first, cutting through the water like a ghost. Amelia followed, dragged in his hold, her arms still caught in his powerful jaws. Her head broke the surface with a gasp that felt like it came from someone else. The world rushed back light, air, the sound of distant shouts. Her vision blurred as her body was lowered to the poolside. The sudden exposure to air didn't bring relief. It brought collapse. Other trainers reached her quickly. No words were exchanged, just hurried movement, tight grips, and expressions etched with disbelief. They worked with quiet urgency, pulling her out of reach, shielding her from Varo's looming presence, still lingering at the tank's edge. For a long moment, no one spoke. At the hospital, doctors moved swiftly. X-rays showed a broken elbow, severe bruising to the lungs, and early signs of internal bleeding. None of it, however, explained the vacant look in her eyes or the way her hands trembled even in rest. For 3 days, Amelia said nothing, no questions, no answers, only silence, heavy and unrelenting. The staff at Luma Vista issued a statement within 24 hours, citing the incident as unexpected and under investigation. All water-based training with Varo was suspended indefinitely. The Orca, who had once been the centerpiece of their highest-selling shows, was now viewed from a cautious distance, his enclosure quieter than ever before. Visitors still came, though fewer than before. Families passed the Orca tank in hushed tones, sensing something unspoken. Employees avoided eye contact when asked about Amelia. The atmosphere, once filled with excitement and wonder, now held a subtle tremor of uncertainty. Within the park's polished exterior, conversations began to shift. Trainers who had once praised Varo's discipline now revisited old warnings, reevaluating behaviors they had brushed aside. A quiet reckoning rippled through Luma Vista, not loud, not immediate, but persistent. Amelia remained off-duty. Her name was no longer listed on the schedule board. Her wetsuit, cleaned and folded, sat untouched in the staff locker room. And though her body slowly healed, the part of her that had believed in perfect harmony between human and Orca remained fractured, its silence louder than any scream. A year before the headlines turned toward Azure Cove or Luma Vista, a different kind of tragedy unfolded quietly beneath the lights of Seasphere San Diego. Lyra, a mature female Orca known across the region for her striking intelligence and near-perfect routines, had been the park's centerpiece for nearly a decade. She was graceful in motion, unusually responsive to cues, and had long been celebrated in promotional campaigns as the heart of the ocean. Her performances drew crowds in the hundreds, families, tourists, students eager to see her glide, spin, and leap with her companions. But behind the brilliance of the spectacle, subtle tensions had taken root. Trainers had noted a growing distance between Lyra and Solon, a larger male Orca introduced into her environment the year prior. There had been signs, long glances, changes in swimming patterns, brief moments of standoffishness during shared routines. None of it was loud enough to raise alarm, but it lingered, unspoken. On the day of the incident, the arena was full. The routine scheduled was a tandem display, a synchronized swim between Solon and Lyra, capped by a group moment involving Neva Lyra's young calf. Neva had been born in captivity, one of the park's celebrated success stories. Guests leaned forward in anticipation, eager to see the mother-daughter interaction that had been advertised as a highlight of the show. As the performance reached its midpoint, Lyra's demeanor shifted. She became hyper-focused, her attention drawn to Solon as he drifted toward Neva. It was subtle, but distinct. What followed wasn't part of the script. Lyra veered from her position, vocalizing in short, sharp bursts, and moved in fast pursuit of the larger male. In what observers later described as a defensive posture, she displayed classic signs of dominance, quick turns, sudden lunges, and physical proximity designed to warn. The behavior mirrored what wild orcas might use to protect a calf from intrusion. But in that final, frantic movement, something misfired. Instead of striking Solon, Lyra's momentum carried her into the pool wall at full speed. The sound echoed unnaturally across the stadium, deep, final, and unforgettable. The water shifted as a thick red bloom emerged from her blowhole. In the seats, silence overtook the audience like a heavy fog. The trainers moved quickly, but not with celebration, with urgency. She was moved to a rear pool, where the veterinary team gathered. Neva swam beside her the entire time, never straying far. For 45 minutes, Lyra remained conscious, though visibly weakened. Staff noted how she kept positioning herself near her calf, circling gently, never turning away. Then, her motion slowed. One final exhale. No applause, no music. Lyra died not in the vastness of the ocean, but within the perimeter of a stage, built to mimic it beneath lights that once painted her as invincible. Sea Sphere had long been a name synonymous with marine wonder, but it was never alone in the illusion it sold. Before Lyra, there was Arroya, the park's original icon, a female orca captured young and molded into the face of a generation's fascination with the ocean. She had graced billboards, appeared in TV commercials, and performed for thousands, often described as gentle and trainer-friendly. But even Arroya had a limit. During a promotional event designed to showcase the safety and joy of orca-human interaction, she snapped. Jenna Calling, a young staff member and certified diver, entered the tank under the supervision of senior trainers. Cameras were rolling, guests were watching, and Arroya was expected to perform her usual gentle swim-by. Instead, the orca bit down on Jenna's leg and refused to let go. The incident unfolded before a stunned crowd, and while Jenna survived, her life was permanently altered physically and emotionally. She never returned to the park. Her name faded from brochures. Arroya's did too, following the attack. Arroya was removed from the performance schedule and isolated from the others. She died quietly months later from an untreated uterine infection at the age of 9, no longer a mascot, just a fading memory. There were no tributes, no final bows. Her passing marked the first internal reckoning, though few acknowledged it then. Hers was the earliest warning that something deeper was broken. Years later, it would take more Raina's death, Amelia's near drowning, Lyra's fatal collision for the message to reach the surface. What once felt like isolated tragedies began to connect. Conversations that had once been whispered behind closed doors became public. News anchors asked hard questions. Protesters lined the entrances of marine parks. Former trainers came forward with stories they had held back for too long. Azure Cove, once considered a leader in marine education and entertainment, never reopened. The tanks were drained. The stage dismantled. Varro was relocated to a marine sanctuary off the Pacific Northwest coast, where he would no longer be asked to perform. Other orcas across Europe and North America were reassessed. Some moved. Others studied more closely than ever before. Still, no press release could restore what had been lost. Raina's parents kept her bedroom exactly as it had been. Amelia's nights remained filled with fragments she couldn't shake. And Neva, the young calf once seen as the future of Sea Sphere, now swam in subdued silence, her world smaller and quieter than it had ever been. The spotlight had dimmed, and in its absence, truths long obscured began to glow faintly through the cracks, not with anger, not with spectacle, but with quiet, persistent clarity. In the end, the applause faded, but the questions remained. Raina, Emilia, Lyra, and before them, Arroya. 4 names, 4 tragedies, all tied to the same long-buried truth. We never truly tamed nature. We simply trapped it behind glass, under lights, and beneath the sound of applause. The grand performance tanks, once praised as marvels of entertainment, have become mirrors, reflecting the unease, loneliness, and crushed instincts of the giant creatures confined within them. This story isn't just about accidents. It's a wake-up call, a reckoning for the way we've traded lives and nature itself for a few fleeting moments of wonder. Perhaps it's time we stop calling it a show and start calling it what it really is, a tragedy built on silence. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can change how the world sees the forgotten beings behind the glass.